Many years have passed since the rapture reached the world, and demonic flesh-eating creatures known as the Burned Ones are wreaking havoc in the forest. At the same time, some of the survivors form a cult where speaking is considered a sin, and they have their vocal cords removed, never to be able to speak again. Azrael and Kenan manage to escape the cult, leaving to survive alone in the forest. One day, Azrael becomes anxious when she hears a noise coming from among the trees, so she quickly puts out a fire Kenan set. Kenan lovingly comforts her as she is still on the verge of a panic attack. In return, Azrael gives him a bracelet that he made from twigs and plants. At that moment, they hear the noise again and realize it is a whistle, meaning that the cult members are chasing them. The pair start to run, but Kenan decides to split up and run in opposite directions. Unfortunately, Azrael is soon spotted by the cult members, who start stalking her. However, when she tries to run back, another member catches her and hits her in the abdomen, weakening her. The men then drag her through the woods, but Azrael realizes that Kenan has been captured as well. Once on the street, Kenan tries to escape. The cult members threaten him with a machete. He and Azrael are then stuffed into the trunk of another car and taken away. Azrael is horrified to see that the road eventually forks and each car is driving in a different lane. She bangs on the trunk to try to open it, but it doesn't work. After a while, the car stops and the cultists take Azrael to a place in the woods. The other cult members are waiting, including Josephine, one of the leaders. Azrael is tied to a chair and Josephine attempts to slash her legs and bleed her out, intending to use her as a sacrifice. Soon the wind begins to blow rather menacingly, shaking the bottles hanging from the trees. Josephine and the cult members walk away and begin panting loudly in a hushed equivalent of a chant. Soon a burnt man appears among the trees, roaring and making his way towards the chair. Azrael was so startled that he kept pulling until he broke one of the armrests. Soon the cultists return to block their escape, and Azrael resists his grab but accidentally stabs himself in the neck with a split piece of wood. The man then tries to leave, but Burned leaps upon him and begins to eat him. Azrael watches in shock as he uses his free hand to untie the other straps, finally breaking free and being able to escape. Josephine and the other cultists have looked away as part of the ritual and only realize Azrael's path when it is too late. At the same time, Burned carries the corpse out onto the road. Sometime later, Azrael stops by a river to wash her wound. She also gathers herbs to dress it. As she works, she is approached slowly from behind by a burned woman. Luckily, she hears it before it gets too close and runs into an abandoned building. Azrael chooses the darkest spot she can find and remains there while the burned one peers inside, searching for her. Not being seen, she eventually leaves. Azrael then finds her way and follows the tire tracks until she finds the cult's camp. Carefully sneaking around, she finds a hiding spot on top of a fence that she can open and enter. Azrael continues to move silently, keeping an eye on the guards to avoid being spotted. After hiding behind a car, she discovers Kenan's bracelet left behind next to some necklaces and thinks the worst. Just then, Josephine and her men return, so Azrael sneaks off to spy on them again. She hides behind a tent and watches Josephine check on a sick old woman. Josephine then enters the chapel where the followers are watching their leader, Miriam. Though she is pregnant, she cannot stop them from performing the ritual of listening to the wind blowing through a hole, as it signals God's will. After listening for a few minutes, Miriam blows out the candles on the altar and everyone leaves. Josephine stays behind to slap Miriam for failing her ritual in the forest, but their activities are suddenly interrupted by a noise outside. Miriam looks out the window and sees nothing, but Azrael hides under a building just in time. Josephine comes out to investigate, so Azrael must keep moving to avoid being spotted. For a moment, she thinks she's succeeded, but suddenly Josephine appears next to her and grabs her leg to stop her from escaping. Josephine then begins to strangle Azrael, and Azrael pushes her away and kicks her in the face. Distraught, Azrael runs around the camp trying to avoid being seen. Josephine rings the bell to alert everyone to the intruder. Soon everyone is banging on bottles and pots to spread the news. Azrael is seen by several cultists who start chasing her and rushes to the fence, injuring her hand on the barbed wire, and quickly finds an opening and climbs over the fence. Her foot gets stuck and a man grabs her leg and tries to pull her back, but Azrael keeps fighting until he kicks her leg free. Another cult member fires, but the bullet hits a tree and Azrael escapes. She runs as fast as she can through the woods until it gets dark and she is too tired to go any further. With her wound still open, she leaves blood trails on rocks and trees, and soon the burnt blood trail begins to follow her scent. Azrael sees her licking the blood from the rocks and quickly runs away again as the creature begins to chase her. To make matters worse, a second burnt one appears and joins the chase as well. Luckily, the first one to be burnt stumbles and falls, allowing Azrael to make it to the road unharmed. Suddenly, a light light appears in front of her and she falls as some huge object comes towards her. It's a truck that stops before hitting her. The driver comes out and, after an initial shock at seeing her as he helps her up, asks if she is a survivor. Azrael is confused and can't answer any of his questions. Instead, she gets in the truck and frantically bangs on it, telling it to drive away. The man gets back behind the wheel and drives through the night. He gives Azrael a cloth to close the wound and explains that he lives at the end of the street where there is plenty of food. Azrael does not understand his language and shows him the cross-shaped scar on her neck to make it clear to him that she cannot speak. The man still does not understand and Azrael continues to try to start a conversation, but to no avail. Just when he gives up, he turns on the radio and Azrael is surprised by the music. After driving only a few miles, the driver suddenly gets shot in the head. The cultist in the middle of TH Street fired several more shots, but they all missed as the truck was out of control. Azrael tries to take the wheel, but the vehicle's body gets in the way, and the truck runs over the man before crashing into a wall. After being unconscious for a few minutes, Azrael wakes up in a daze, with her head bleeding profusely. She takes a few steps out of the truck and falls to her knees in pain, only to realize that the cultist is still alive. Azrael leaps onto him and begins fighting him for the weapon, accidentally firing it and hitting him twice in the head before he begins tumbling into the woods. Once they are away, the man tries to shoot them again, but realizes he is out of bullets and uses his gun to shoot Azrael in the leg instead. At that moment, she finds a fallen magazine and hits the cultist over the head with it several times, before kicking him away. Azrael then crawls to the gun and loads it, but the man grabs her from behind and he tries to strangle her. During the fight, she manages to position the weapon and fire, being the last one to kill the man. Azrael then wanders the forest with the weapon. She is surprised to see a fire burning near a tree. She slowly approaches and discovers that it is Kenan, nailed to the tree. Just as he is about to reach the top, he accidentally steps on a trap and the rope wraps around his leg, leaving him hanging upside down from a branch. A cultist appears, takes his gun and hits Kenan with it. At that moment, the wind starts blowing very hard, distracting the cultist. Azrael tries to climb the rope, but hurts her hand even more. When she turns around, the cultist is gone. Suddenly, the man is pinned against a tree by the burned man and begins to eat his dinner. A desperate Azrael tries to climb the rope, ignoring the excruciating pain in her hands, when a second burnt one appears to help her kill her fellow cultist. She reaches the top of the tree just in time to see a third burnt one join the other two in eating the man. As the creatures finish off the cultists, one of them disappears with the body, but the second one also jumps on Kenan and kills him. Kenan's body is also dragged away after being bitten several times, but the third animal begins to climb the tree. Azrael has to stop to remove the rope from S' feet, giving the scorched one time to climb up to her and pin her against the branch with surprising force. When the bird attempts to bite her, Azrael puts the rope around her neck and pushes her off the tree, which also falls. She survives the fall, but sometime later, Azrael returns to the cultists' camp with her weapon. She hides behind a tree and whistles, pretending to be one of the cultists. Soon, Josephine leads a small group of followers into the forest to investigate, leaving a path clear for Azrael to sneak into the camp through the same hole in the fence as last time. Carefully, she enters the chapel and finds Miriam, who appears weak with her pregnant belly showing. When Azrael hesitates to shoot, Miriam quickly disarms him and hits her over the head with a frying pan. As Azrael falls, he scratches Miriam's stomach. Josephine and her group then drag Azrael to S' grave in the woods. They smear blood on her face while listening to the sound of the wind, then throw her into the coffin, which they quickly close and cover with earth. Azrael panics and runs into a tree, but no one comes to help him. After the funeral, a lantern at Azrael's feet suddenly lights up, revealing a tunnel leading to the coffin. Azrael begins crawling through the tunnel with the lantern, only to find a burning lantern at the opposite end. She quickly turns and returns to the coffin as quickly as she can, but the creature follows her, quickly crawling towards her. But instead of eating her, it smells her hands, and, when it recognizes the smell of Miriam's blood, it barks in agreement and leaves. Feeling safe, Azrael tries to go through the tunnel again, and this time he manages to escape. A little while later, Josephine, hearing a noise, rushes out of the chapel and is horrified to find the tent where the old lady is on fire. The cultists raise the alarm and others join them in trying to put out the fire, but it is too late. The old lady is dead and the flames have already spread through the camp. This provides Azrael with perfect cover to sneak up and shoot the cult members one by one. Josephine watches in horror and tries to leave, but Azrael shoots her in the stomach and she slowly dies. As everyone panics and tries to run, the fire reaches a gas cylinder, causing a small explosion. A man is devastated to find out his girlfriend has been shot and grabs a gun to protect himself. He exchanges shots with Azrael and the two sneak around. As the fire slowly destroys the camp, the man hears the sound of a whistle coming from some corner and wanders around in confusion. Azrael thinks it's a joke and shoots the first shadow he sees, but then realizes he has killed another member. The shock causes him to freeze, and Azrael uses the opportunity to launch a surprise attack, decapitating the man with his machete. Azrael then re-enters the chapel, where Miriam leaps at her from behind and disarms her with her own blade. Miriam begins chasing Azrael around the room, shifting benches to eventually grab her. She pushes Azrael against the table and attempts to decapitate him, but he kicks her away. When Miriam attacks again, Azrael easily dodges, pushing Miriam against the wall and biting her neck. As Miriam tries to bear the pain, her water finally breaks. Suddenly, someone in the chapel fires a shot at the cross. It is Josephine, who moves very slowly due to her wounds. She continues to fire her gun as she approaches Azrael, but stops firing when she notices Miriam giving birth on her bed. Azrael uses the distraction to knock Josephine to the ground, breaking the bench in the process. Josephine breaks a piece of wood off Azrael's bench, but Azrael does the same in return. Then Josephine draws a small blade, but Azrael blocks her attack and smashes her head against a bench before dropping her. Azrael then picks up Miriam's knife and strikes Josephine in the neck. Just as she hears the baby's cries, Josephine pulls the knife out of her neck and finally collapses dead. Miriam, appearing terrified, leaves the bed and commits suicide using Azrael's machete. Suddenly, a strong wind blows into the chapel, extinguishing all the candles. The horde of burned people they cross the forest and the camp and enter the chapel where Azrael picks up a baby. The child takes the form of a goat and turns out to resemble the Antichrist. The burnt ones roar to welcome their new leader. Azrael smiles, recognizing the power in his arms. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Leave a comment about your favorite movie and we will make it next. Thanks for watching.